A wonderful topic this morning, and it just seems like there's so much that we skip over, but this priesthood is a twofold priesthood, and you'll notice when we put in at verse 4, then brought he me the way of the north gate. This is Ezekiel 44, which Brother Mike read so well, and verse 4, then brought he me the way of the north gate toward the house, and I looked, and behold, the glory of Yahweh filled the house of Yahweh, and I fell upon my face. And if you'll just flip back real quick over to chapter 43 and verse 1 and 2, we read, afterward he brought me to the gate, even the gate that looketh toward the east. And behold, the glory of the Elohim of Israel came from the way of the east, and his voice was like a noise of many waters, and the earth shined with his glory. And that last phrase just reminds you of Numbers 14:21, does it not? Because that's ultimately what God is going to do with the whole earth. But here Ezekiel is in vision, and he is seeing the glory of the God of Israel coming from the way of the east. The sun's rising, and it enters into the house. And it was according to the appearance of the vision, which he saw according to the vision when he came, or that I saw when I came to destroy the city. And the visions were like the vision that I saw by the river Kibar, and I fell upon my face. And the glory of Yahweh came into the house by the way of the gate, whose prospect is toward the east. So he mentions it again. Now, the reason I bring that up is because the glory is actually, if you go back to where Ezekiel received that vision, it was the cherubim. And many of you know what I'm talking about, the cherubim of the four creatures, the four living creatures with the wings and the four faces that represent the commonwealth of Israel, face of the man, the lion, the eagle, and the ox. And that in itself is a wonderful symbolic enigma of the glory of the saints in Christ as they move into the earth. And then finally here, this is after, of course, the judgments upon the earth. This is after Christ and the saints have conquered the world, and the temple has been built over a period of 30 years during that domination of the nations. And so when Ezekiel sees the glory, it in itself is symbolic. It's like it's hidden, because we are hidden today. All of those saints that will make up the body of Christ and that priesthood in the age to come are basically hidden today. We're concealed. No one knows who we are. We don't even know amongst ourselves who will make up that body of believers in the day when they are made immortal. And the judgment seat will determine that. That'll be our final education. And we were discussing that last evening, that the judgment seat will be our final manifestation from a mortal perspective, transitioning into an immortal perspective, because therein will our minds, all that is in shade, all that is in cover, all that is in disguise today will be exposed. And we will be able to see clearly each other through and through. Today we can hide, right? Today we can conceal. Today we have a disguise, but not in that day. And Christ, and that's the purpose of the judgment. And that's a whole new topic. But these priests, as we jump to chapter 44, back to 44, please, you'll notice I want to make this remark, that down in verse, as you start to read in verse, let's go back up to 5. This injunction where Yahweh said unto me, Son of man. And you'll notice Ezekiel takes on that very title that Jesus took on himself. Mark well and behold with thine eyes, hear with thine ears, all that I say unto thee concerning all the ordinances of the house of Yahweh, and all the laws thereof, and mark well the entering in of the house with every going forth of the sanctuary. And thou shalt say to the rebellious, now he's addressing Israel, O house of Israel, and they themselves as a nation, not only in the days of Babylon, and when Ezekiel received the vision and went to the children of Israel who were in captivity, but again it will be repeated when Christ approaches the nation of Israel. And he goes on to talk about those, the end that ye have brought. Now notice verse 6. This is an interesting statement. And thou shalt say to the rebellious, even to the house of Israel, Thus saith Adonai Yahweh, O ye house of Israel, let it suffice you of all your abominations, in that ye have brought into my sanctuary strangers, uncircumcised in heart and uncircumcised in flesh. And basically what he's saying is, out of all the ungodly things you've done, be content in that I've only mentioned this in verse 7. And that's why he says, you've brought into my sanctuary. In other words, to pollute it, you brought in these uncircumcised Gentiles in heart and flesh. And when you offer my bread, the fat and the blood, and they have broken my covenant because of all your abominations. And you have not kept the charge of mine holy things, but you have set keepers of my charge and my sanctuary for yourself. And that is exactly why the ecclesia gradually, after becoming a state religion under Constantine, and had, of course, lost the truth long before that, but paid ministry comes in to that point. Paid ministry enters into the brotherhood early on. And paid ministry is to take the burden of responsibility to study, to read, to pray, to minister, to witness of the things of God, and hand it over to a pastor, a staff of preachers. And basically, that's exactly what Israel had done. Instead of bearing the responsibility, they had basically taken the Ark of the Covenant, and instead of bearing it on their shoulders, where did they place it when it entered into the city under David? On the ox cart. And what did it result in? It resulted in death of a righteous man who tried to stabilize the cart because the system was breaking down. You know what's happening, don't you, brethren? Turn with me to Ezekiel 33. We'll get to the slides. Verse 30. Ezekiel, the entertainer. Also, thou son of man, the children of thy people still are talking against thee, or of thee, about thee, by the walls and in the doors of the houses, and speak one to another, every one to his brother, saying, Come, I pray you, and hear what is the word that cometh forth from Yahweh. And they come unto thee as the people cometh, and they sit before thee as my people, and they hear thy words, but they will not do them. For with their mouth they show much love, but their heart goeth after their covetousness. And lo, thou art unto them as a very lovely song, of one that hath a pleasant voice, and can play well on an instrument. For they hear thy words, but they do them not. And when this cometh to pass, lo, it will come. Then shall they know that a prophet hath been among them. So, brethren, we've got to be very, very careful, all of us, myself especially, in that we would like to hear Brother so-and-so. We'll bring him for a study day. Brother so-and-so for a Bible school. Brother so-and-so. Oh, he's a great speaker. Knows his Bible so well. And then we forget what was said. And we all do it, every one of us. And we're no different than Israel. No different at all. And do we go home and do we reconsider the things that we've heard from God's Word and sort of just let the messenger fade away into the background? No, we don't. Not all of us. But Godspeed upon the ones that do, because you're the ones that are going to continue to keep our faith alive. And Christ will find it in this ecclesia and your ecclesias. He will find it, because you're not inviting brethren to speak, to entertain you. Right? Right. Just had to make that clear, because I have to make it clear for myself. Okay, let's go to the slides and stay in Ezekiel 44, if you would, please. The priesthood, the God's glory, and the altar. We are entering right into the heart. The altar is God manifestation, and you remember where it was placed in the tabernacle, when the very first structured worship center of a communal level, a corporate, as it were, level, a metropolis level, where God set the tabernacle right in the midst, and all the tents of Israel faced inward towards the tent. So the enemy that came upon this encampment of Israel would look at them and say, boy, are they backwards. They're all facing inward. They should be facing outward, like the Old West covered wagons that circle and they all get ready for the Indian attack. Well, not Israel. They're all facing inward. What a backward people. And yet God wanted them to have faith that, hey, I've got your back. Don't worry about the enemy. I've got your back. And so that's why they all faced inward, because the Shekinah glory of the cloud was over the tabernacle and the pillar of cloud went up from the most holy. And so you're starting to see the seed of the temple of Ezekiel's prophecy, aren't you? It had the transition of Solomon's temple. So as you can see, the tabernacle and the altar, and it's not very clear, and I apologize for that, but here's the altar and the laver, and Moses, Aaron, and his sons were here, the priesthood. The Levites were between the people, the tribes of Israel, encamping on the north, south, east, and west, and the Levites between them. And so we're looking at the priesthood closest to Yahweh's table, where his food was consumed by him. He was the consumer at the top of the food chain. Okay? And you go down the food chain, and we're somewhere between God, Christ, the angels, man, woman, children, animals, down here, the dominion of the earth. There's a food chain. And it's pyramidal in a sense. And God's food is represented by the offerings brought up from the people through the priesthood, as they represent the people to God and they represent God to the people. Very, very interesting and very structured. And only of the sons of Aaron would the priesthood be a lineage. The lineage would come through Aaron's sons, and the king was never of the tribe of Levi. The king was always the tribe of Judah, right? And never the twain shall meet. There was always two different people, king and priest, king and priest. They were never one until Christ comes, right? Or before that, under the priesthood of who? Good, Melchizedek. Melchizedek, king of righteousness. Zadok. Verse 15. Chapter 44. But the priests, the Levites, the sons of Zadok. There's that word in the name Melchizedek. Melchizedek. So, we've got the sons of righteousness that kept the charge. So from verse 15 through 16 is a parenthetical phrase. You could just take a little red pen and go all the way around those two verses. Because the priesthood he speaks of from verse 4, the ones that had brought in the stranger and the uncircumcised. Look at verse 9 now. In the kingdom age, and I mentioned this yesterday, thus saith Adonai Yahweh, no stranger, uncircumcised in heart nor uncircumcised in flesh, shall enter into my sanctuary, or any stranger that is among the children of Israel. And the Levites that are gone away far from me, when Israel went astray, which went astray from me after their idols, they shall even bear their iniquity. So they shall be ministers in my sanctuary, having charge at the gates of the house and ministering to the house, and they shall slay the burnt offering and the sacrifice for the people, and they shall stand before them to minister unto them. Now I see this all as really happening, and I'm sure you've gathered that from my presentation, that I actually believe all this in Ezekiel 40 through 48 is going to come to pass. I really believe it's going to happen. I don't believe it was a condition that God made to Israel and said, if you do this, then I will do all these things that I'm showing Ezekiel. And then because they didn't do it, God's going to say, well, just forget it. I'm not going to do any of those things. I'm not going to accomplish any of those things. So there. I don't somehow see that happening. I don't think it was that conditional. Because Yahweh knew full well that Israel would do or not do what he told them to do. And so I believe that when he says where does it mention that we just got through reading? Verse 7. The keepers of the charge, the sacrifices, they would offer, there it is, in verse 11. Yet they shall be ministers in my sanctuary, having charge at the gates of the house, and ministering to the house. They shall slay the burnt offering and sacrifice of the people. When people ask me, are there going to be sacrifices in the kingdom age? I don't answer them. I take them and let God answer them, because that's what he's saying. So when you read that, continued through verse 11 and verse 12 and verse 13, notice 13, they shall not come near unto me to do the office of a priest unto me, nor to come near to any of my holy things in the most holy place, but they shall bear their shame and their abominations which they've committed. But I will make them keepers of the charge of the house, like servants, for all the service thereof and for all that shall be done therein. So the twofold priesthood is that the mortal Levite priest will tend to the people and interface as God's representatives to the people, and they will take and minister to the people, show them where to go. They will give them orientation, show them the proper protocol and how to act in the house of the Lord. But when it comes to the divine worship service and the acceptance of God, of their offerings to God, whereas they used to be able to go and place it on the altar, remember, under the law and under Aaron's sons, now they can't. Now they're only able to go through to the holy temple and hand off the offering to an immortal. And that's where verse 15 comes in. Because the priests, the Levites, the sons of Zadok, that kept the charge of my sanctuary when the children of Israel went astray from me, they shall come near to me. So you see the contrast of they shall not come near to me in verse 13 with those of the sons of Zadok that will come near to me. So it's not a contradiction. It's just a clarification that once you make that little red mark around 15 and 16, then you see it jump back to 17 regarding mortal priests. And it shall come to pass when they enter in at the gates and so on, they shall be clothed with linen garments, no wool shall come upon them whilst they minister in the gates of the inner court within. They shall have them linen bonnets. It talks about the sweating, talks about putting off the garments, talks about neither shall they shave their heads, suffer their locks to grow long, and so on, which is obviously characteristics of mortals, right? So when the mortal priests are operating, it's just those two little verses that are dropped in there to show us that the immortals will actually be the ones who approach the table of the Lord. If you'll jump back to 41, Ezekiel 41. We mentioned yesterday about the table of the Lord. I want to show you the verse. It's called the altar at first. Verse 22 of chapter 41, Ezekiel 41:22. The altar of wood was 3 cubits high. And according to the cubit, we have learned the measure of the house. It's a royal cubit, which is about 2 feet, and the length thereof 2 cubits. So you've got a 6-foot high table. Okay, I'm about 6'3". So that table would be about this high, and the length 4 feet, or 2 cubits. So you've got a 6x4 block of wood, because it says, and the corners thereof, the length thereof, and the walls thereof were of wood. And he said unto me, this is the table that is before Yahweh. This is the table that is before Yahweh. And the word before, if my marginal notes are correct, is the same word panim, which means face, the faces, all the way back to the faces of the Lord. So this table has no, as you noticed, length. It's got the breadth, or it's called length, but it's height 6 feet and about 4 feet wide, thick, and it's all wood. What an odd measurement just for a block of wood called the table of the Lord. But Brother Sully makes an amazing suggestion, as we said yesterday, that table will actually float in a channel that will be just a little bit larger than that block of table, that wood, and it will circle all the way around the circular building of the temple. And it will float carefully, just the most precise engineering that men have seen regarding wood floating device in a stone channel filled with water and kept where it doesn't bump or jar any of the conveyances on that table as it floats around. And it will be the table before which the immortal saints will place the offerings as they are conveyed completely around to the eastern side, where the ascending ramp will go up to that 200-foot brazen altar. And we'll take a look at that in a minute. Let's look at Ezekiel 40 and verse 44. Just jumping back, we're going to take a look at a few chambers here, try to make this. In chapter 40 and verse 44, you'll notice it says, and without the inner gate were the chambers of the singers in the inner court, which was at the side of the north gate, and their prospect was toward the south, one at the side of the east gate, having the prospect toward the north. And he said unto me, this chamber, whose prospect is toward the south, is for the priests, the keepers of the charge of the house. And we know who that is. Those are your mortal Levites. They keep charge of the house, as opposed to the priest sons of Zadok, who kept the charge of the table, who came near to the table. And the chamber whose prospect is toward the north is for the priests, the keepers of the charge of the altar. These are the sons of Zadok. So right away you noticed in verse 45, you've got the circular building, and I'll jump ahead, but you'll notice on this slide that the green semicircle at the top is what he's talking about here, and that is the circle for the immortals, the sons of Zadok, who keep the altar. But you have a red semicircle in the south, and that is what he just referred to as whose prospect is toward the south, is for the priest, the keepers of the charge of the house. So I wanted to show you the location, and these are chambers of Levite singers. So as you recall, in the days of David, the Levites were responsible for not only singing, but for music as well. So that, if you go back to 1 Chronicles 25:1, moreover, David and the captains of the host separated to the service of the sons of Asaph and of Heman and Jeduthun, who should prophesy with harps, with psalteries, and with cymbals, and the number of the workmen according to their service was. And then you jump to verse 2, of the sons of Asaph, Zachar, Joseph, Nethaniah, and Asarela, the sons of Asaph, under the hands of Asaph, which prophesied according to the order of the king. So that verse is just simply showing you that the singers is not something just drawn out of the air, but out of the history of Israel. And so we've discussed that. And the most holy, therefore, is shown as an open area inside the temple, not square in form, but like a mountain with buildings round about, as we have discussed through the weekend. The most holy or temple area, and we've noticed that that northern section and the southern section, respectively, are for the immortals and for the mortal priest. It's a circular range of buildings. This is the gateway of the front of one of these gates. Circular in range is about 30 of them. If you go back and notice that, well, I've got it covered in color, but these, they have cella, these inner cella are similar to the outer court. There's about 30 of them. They're 450 feet in length and 200 feet and 260 feet in width. They're 200 feet in height, so like a 20-story building, separated the one from the other by a covered walkway that is 40 feet wide. And this is a continuous range of porticos presented. Now, this is where we saw that the thrones of judgment would be placed right directly behind each one of these statues or monuments, beholding having the face of a man on one side and the face of a lion on the other. And the reason for that is that Christ is Son of Man, but King of Judah. Now, this is a cross-section of one of the circular buildings, and as you can see, it has 4 stories, including the ground floor. And this is a larger view of one of these cella of the inner court of the holy, most holy place. The gates of the most holy, and we're not going to go into the technical part of it, but there's some very interesting allusions here, and one of them is that Brother Sully determined from the measurements that inside of this cella would actually be one door is 6 cubits on the inside. If we went this direction of the arch, on the inside it's 6 cubits. On the outside of that same building, just 50 cubits away, it's the same door, mirror door, is 7. And you know what that does when you have a wider width at 7. It creates, if you multiply them, it's got to create a circle. And that's almost so subtle in the measurements, and that's why the details have to be found out. And Brother Sully spent his life looking into this and finding out, confirming the proof of these, of why it was a circular building. It's almost like it was a hidden thing until he discovered that one simple, tiny little measurement. It's quite amazing. Now, we have looked at the 2 classes among the sons of Levi, of priests who operate within the circular temple, one mortal, the other immortal. And the mortal Levite's duty is to teach the people. We read of that in Malachi 2 and verse 4 through 8, and we might just look at that real quick because it pertains to our own lives and our own exhortation as a priesthood today, because we really are a priesthood. Malachi 2 verse 3. Behold, let's start with 4, I believe. And you shall know that I have sent this commandment unto you, that my covenant might be with Levi, saith Yahweh of armies. My covenant was with him of life and peace, and I gave them to him for the fear wherewith he feared me, and was afraid before my name. The law of truth was in his mouth, and iniquity was not found in his lips. He walked with me in peace and equity, and did turn many away from iniquity. For the priest's lips should keep knowledge, and they should seek the law at his mouth, for he is the messenger of Yahweh of armies. And then he starts with, but you are departed. And that just seems to be the constant echo that Yahweh was dealing with Israel. But he was trying to build a nation of priests, and we will be a kingdom of priests. We will reign with Christ as kings and priests. But we've got to learn the difference in right and wrong. And it starts with right doctrine versus wrong doctrine. The churches have a facade that looks similar to ours. Someone not knowing Christadelphians could stop, pull in the parking lot, walk in, and without knowing the truth, they would be blind to the difference between us. And only until sitting down with them and asking them their doctrinal beliefs, which most people don't really pay much attention to today, and discussing with them ours, which most of you have done, and find and know it to be an excellent exercise in keeping yourself sharp on your own doctrinal fundamental beliefs, they would never know the difference. They couldn't tell the difference. They can't see the difference, can't hear the difference, and in no way will they make a difference in this world. I don't care how smart they are. I don't care how many degrees and letters they have behind their name. I don't care how many digits are in their income figure at the bank. It doesn't matter. They'll never make a significant difference in this world. They may get their name like Alexander the Great and die at 33, but the kind of difference that you and I know has to be made can only be made by men and women who are of this priestly class, and that is based upon a knowledge. And that's exactly what we read at the end of chapter 44, if you'll jump back there and just let me remind you of that. Verse 23, "And they shall teach my people the difference between the holy and profane, and cause them to discern between the unclean and the clean. And in controversy they shall stand in judgment. And they shall judge it according to my judgments, and they shall keep my laws and my statutes in all mine assemblies, and they shall hallow my Sabbaths." So that difference has to be understood. We need to learn how to listen, like the last time I was at North Industry and used the cup, and Brother Jack and Sister Jan reminded me of the little cup illustration of water, both filling the cups, and you have an empty cup you slide out, and you set your own beliefs over to the side, because we are full of our beliefs and we're constantly trying to project them onto others, like flipping water out of one cup into another. And only until we start to listen by setting ours down, picking up an empty cup and saying, "I want to hear what you believe and have to say," then a relationship can really start to develop if we listen and then learn their argument better than they know it themselves, and then make suggestions, ask questions, and encourage them to be a better Bible student and bring them along. But this controversy, conflict, and confrontation, it's good fencing. You know, you can always sharpen your sword by that. And yes, some people will come in a contentious way and in an argumentative way, and if you can get them down into a half Nelson headlock and say, "Uncle, just say uncle, just say I'm right," you might get them in. Let me know how it goes at your next business meeting with that individual voicing their expressions. Let me know how that goes, okay? Because the kind of spirit you replicate to an individual and bringing them in, the kind of spirit that you demonstrate will come back to haunt you, good or bad. Let's move on. I'm moving a little slow, I guess you can tell, but it's deliberate because I really think this is an extremely important part of our study. So chapter 44, verses 4 through 9, which we read, and chapter 44, 10 through 31, Ezekiel's now taken to this north gate, place of the killing of the sacrificial animals. Remember, that's where they go in from the north and bring their sacrifices, and he's made to understand that never again will Israel be permitted to defile Yahweh's holy house. So we have to be careful how we defile Yahweh's holy house. We can defile ourselves by a number of ways. We get a lot of focus on defilement by drugs, and you know, many of you know my plight. About 5 years ago, I had to leave my company and retire early because of hepatitis that I caught by experimenting with drugs at 19 years of age. I found the truth, I changed my life, changed my way, and then 40 years later, after many years of preaching the truth, hepatitis comes in again. Says, I'm back. And bam, doctor said, you got a year. Your liver's on its way out. You got a year if you don't do anything. So we decided, I've got a free ticket to the resurrection. I'm just going to let it slide. I'm not going to do anything. Wendy says, oh no, you're not gonna leave me behind. So anyway, she and my doctor said, "You ever seen anybody die of liver disease?" I said, "No." He said, "It's not pretty. You don't want to go there." And so we worked to resolve the problem over a couple of years. And Wendy found a new doctor, a very good one, and he worked with us, and we went through natural ways of trying to heal it and reduce the viral load count. And I'm just telling you this real quickly because it's an interesting story to me, that the doctor, the minute we met him and went in his office, he said, "So what can I do for you?" Wendy said, "Just keep him alive until Christ comes and you've done your job." So he says, I'm going to take you off the clock for the next 20 minutes, and we're going to talk about your faith. We said, okay. And so after we finished that 20-minute discussion, he said, Stan, could you come over to my apartment and lead one of my Bible studies during the week? And within 2 years, Dr. Gil Manso is now Brother Gil Manso, and with a higher title than a doctor. But he has a list of credentials as long as your arm. Wonderful man, wonderful friend. And so you get hepatitis, so you're worried about your sickness, you're worried about your illness, but God can bring good out of it. He can bring good out of it. So, you suffer, and we'll talk more about that in the exhort. Got to keep moving. They had offered to him polluted bread, the fat and the blood, literally in their hearts, both people and priests. So in their hearts, in their minds, there was a pollution. And God wouldn't allow them to come near to his table in the kingdom, would he? Okay, so of the Levites, it is said that they will be the keepers of the charge of the house. We've looked at that. The ministers in my sanctuary, having charge of the gates of the house and ministering to the house, they shall slay the burnt offering and the sacrifice for the people. They shall stand before them to minister unto them. But they shall not come near to me to do the office of the priest unto me, nor to come near to any of my holy things in the most holy. So we've pretty much looked at the chambers of the singers, and so he measures the court in 40 and 47, the altar, as we see, and let's just take a quick look at that verse. If you turn back one page to chapter 43 in your Bibles. This altar is made of brass. We looked at the metal of the brass in the tabernacle and the brass laver and the brass altars in Solomon's temple. And it's 12 reeds square, which actually amounts to about 200 feet square. It's an enormous altar, and water will flow out from under it. But you'll notice in verse 10, Thou son of man, show the house to the house of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their iniquities, and let them measure the pattern. And if they be ashamed of all that they have done, show them the form of the house, and the fashion thereof, and the goings out thereof, and the comings in thereof, and all the forms thereof, and all the ordinances thereof, and all the forms thereof, and all the laws thereof. And you think you've gone through some detail this weekend, brothers and sisters? We haven't even scratched the surface compared to what Yahweh wanted Ezekiel to show to Israel. I mean, you just put a little emphasis on that verse 11, and it's just repetitive. He wanted Ezekiel to show them all the intricate details, not to the point to where they could build it. I mean, that would take much, much more than what we've got in these last 8 chapters to build this thing. It's enormous. He gave them enough to where it would impress upon them the details, just like you probably did when you laid out the floor plan for your new ecclesial hall. I mean, you saw the floor plans, and you looked, and you saw, well, this is the main auditorium, and you saw where the kitchen was, and you designed it, and it all worked out because you got a vision from that floor plan. Or did y'all just kind of let somebody build this without looking and show up one day and say, this looks nice? Was that the way it was done? No, I don't think so. That's not how we built the camp at T4C. It took a lot of planning, didn't it? And a lot of envisioning and a lot of trying to anticipate problems and conflicts of entrance and exits and bathrooms and kitchen. It took a lot of projecting from the floor plan. And what we have here is the floor plan. So you've got to start envisioning the temple of Ezekiel's prophecy, the house of prayer, and filling in the details, I assure you. Because as he goes on to say in verse 12, this is the law of the house. Upon the top of the mountain, the whole limit thereof, round about, shall be most holy. Behold, this is the law of the house. He starts that verse with, this is the law of the house. And he ends the verse, this is the law of the house. And these are the measures of the altar. It's God in sacrificial manifestation. The whole world is going to learn the principle of God in sacrificial manifestation. Just like they did when they came up to the gate of the tabernacle. The gate was pulled back, and the individual who came up to worship would walk in and see that altar And that was the first thing they saw, was the altar. Smacked them right in the face. So this altar is going to be projected up on a high mountain so that the whole world can see it, even over the height of the exterior court buildings and the inner circular building. From a distance, they'll see that gleaming altar. If the cloud, if the Shekinah glory cloud has been elevated and lifted above in service, they will see that altar. And he gives us all the dimensions in verse 13 and verse 14 and verse 15, and you can go into we're not going to go into all the details about the, except for one little detail. And if you'll notice in verse 15, so the altar, and you'll notice, and if you have a King James margin, that number 4 talks about the mountain of God. It's in the subscript 4, Harel, the mountain of God, shall be 4 cubits, and from the altar upward shall be 4 horns. It'll have horns like the old altar, and the altar shall be 12 cubits. There's that italicized little gotcha. 12 cubits. You read superficial. What should that word be? Remember our rule? If it's in italics and it says cubits, it needs to be reeds, unless it specifically says cubits. But that does not. And the translators took the liberty of putting in cubits. It's not. It's reeds, which of course makes it a massive altar, 2/3 the size of a football field. And it's over the source of water, which we'll look at in our exhort. So, and he goes on to say, and notice one other one. It's in verse 16. He says, and the altar. Now the translators there, and my eyes are just about failing me, but the altar says in the middle column of my verse here, it says Ariel, A-R-I-E-L. That is, somebody shout it out for me. Yes, you whispered it, but that's just as good. And we'll all be whispering, won't we? The Lion of God. The Lion of God in the center of that altar. The Lion. Why the Lion? Why does he call it the Lion of God, young people? Because the flame that will come down and consume those sacrifices is like a lion. If a lion were in here roaring from the door, those monstrous beasts of the jungle, the Sahara, they just have this paralyzing effect on the victims. And that lion, that fire that will come down and consume the sacrifice before all the eyes of the visitors who come up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles, and it will be no wonder. If you've ever heard thunder that just booms, it just shakes you to the point where you almost want to go down on your face. And if you knew it came from an intelligent being, well, you would. So this Lion of God in the middle of this altar, and that's what it's saying right here, the Lion of God. And it will be for the consumption of sacrifices pointing back to Christ and pointing back to his sacrifice, that Yahweh won the victory of the spirit over flesh, the spirit against the flesh that began in Genesis 3:15. Isaiah 61 and verse 5. And strangers shall stand and feed your flocks, and the sons of the alien shall be your plowmen and your vine dressers, but ye shall be named the priests of Yahweh. Men shall call you the ministers of our Elohim. You shall eat the riches of the Gentiles, and in their glory shall you boast yourselves. Wow, what a change for the Jews, right? The Jews are actually going to now be boasting in the glory they share with Christ, when for 2,000 years they have denied and ridiculed and denigrated and just like people with hardened hearts, they turned away, but not anymore. For your shame you shall have double, and for confusion they shall rejoice in their portion. Therefore in their land they shall possess the double. Everlasting joy shall be unto them. That's that firstborn nation of Israel. Abraham will be a father of many nations, but he's going to have one firstborn, right? And that's Israel. And that's the important role they will play. Verse 8, for I, Yahweh, love judgment. I hate robbery for burnt offering, and I will direct their work in truth, and will make an everlasting covenant with them, because they will be a nation of priests. At the heart of that nation will be the immortal priest. And at the heart of those immortal priests, you and I will be Christ, our King and High Priest. And of a higher order, of a Melchizedek order, not of the Levite order so much. The structural arrangements for the inner porches are admirably suited to their purpose. Brother Sully mentions, for the immortal priest will use them, and such need no doors or entrances on their own account. Except, and you know what verse comes to mind when you think about, we don't need doors or windows in this porch. We'll go to that porch. The table, remember, is a continuous wooden table that follows a channel. Well, how do we get from inside the table over into the garden, the most holy paradise of landscape where the water comes down from under the altar? How are we going to get across that table? Going to jump? Well, we don't understand the nature of immortal angels until we start thinking about them and how they move, how Philip moved, how Jesus came into a room behind locked doors to see his disciples. We will be of a spirit nature like Jesus described to Nicodemus, right? He said, you will be born from above, from the top. You will have a nature like wind. Being born of spirit or change of nature is like the wind. You hear the effect of it, but you don't know from whence it's coming or where it's going. So Isaiah 60 in verse 7, this is an interesting verse regarding the transporting of angelic conveyance, being able to move from this point. If I were to suddenly disappear and appear in that far corner, just like that, holler at everyone, and you turned around and saw me, and just as you saw me, I disappeared again, and then bam, right here again. You would think, uh-oh, we're in trouble. And that's what we'll be able to do. And not only that, but project ourselves, I believe, in numerous ways to our individuals who we're instructing. Not for our glory, but for God's. Not for fun, but for His glory. This verse, all the flocks of Kedar shall be gathered together unto thee. The rams of Nebaioth shall minister unto thee. They shall come up with acceptance on mine altar. There's that altar again in the kingdom of sacrifices. And I will glorify the house of my glory. And then he says, interestingly enough, who are these that fly as a cloud and as the doves to their windows? What an odd expression. Clouds and doves. We look up, we've got at home numerous doves everywhere. And it's interesting. They're just so peaceful in the mornings and evenings. Clouds and doves, of course, is talking about the saints. You know, as Jesus was taken up in a cloud, wasn't it? So the areas of the mortal priest, the towers, we're going to go through them in about 2 minutes because these towers are really magnificent. Priesthood in Jerusalem coincide. No, actually, we're covering the towers in the next class. So we can conclude. Let me just. Very good verse in Haggai 2:9. The glory of this latter house shall be greater than that of the former, saith Yahweh of hosts, and in this place will I give peace, saith Yahweh of armies. And Zechariah's prophecy of peace in chapter 6, verse 12 through 13. And speak unto him, saying, Thus speaketh Yahweh of armies, saying, Behold, the man whose name is the branch, and he shall grow up out of his place, and he shall build the temple of Yahweh, even he shall build the temple of Yahweh. And he shall bear the glory, and shall sit and rule upon his throne. He shall be a priest upon his throne, and the counsel of peace shall be between them both. Prophecy of Christ assuming the position of both king and priest. Now, I've only given you just a taste of that topic. I encourage you to follow through on the glory and the priesthood and the altar, because it's just a beautiful theme all the way through Scripture. And that prophecy of peace shows you how that the king position and the priest, you'll notice it says, he shall sit and rule upon his throne, kingly, royal, and he shall be a priest upon his throne. So the dovetail of the position of the priest of Melchizedek, of king of righteousness and the king of peace, will be in Jesus Christ and his bride, which we all are aspiring to be. So thank you so much for your attention this morning.